Hi there, I'm Mary Flack at Insight Fine Art Studio, and today I'm going to be giving you a short lesson about ways that you can block in a painting successfully. So, I think blocking in a painting is one of the most important steps in actually ensuring that you get to complete a painting successfully. And it's one where a lot of beginners aren't really sure what the term blocking in a painting means, or maybe how to best approach that stage of the painting. So, I want to show you that. Let's get started. Over here on my palette, I have just a little jar of clean turp and I have some burnt umber. And I'm just going to move the paint around on the palette and just swirl that around in some turp. The image that I'll be using today is just this little picture of a bird. It's got some nice color and form and some good values. So I think this makes a good subject for beginners as well. Now, there's a couple of ways to start, and we'll go over these, but just know that when you have a terpenoid here or like a Gamsol odorless mineral spirits, you also want to have a cotton cloth with you just so that you can kind of use that to wipe your brush and wipe the canvas. So I like to begin by placing a few initial marks on my canvas and kind of just looking at the direction of the bird. I don't like to draw the whole shape all at once before I have some sense of like where that's going to live, where that's going. Now, there are so many different measurement techniques that I could show you. And certainly in future videos, if those are things that you would like to look at, we can talk about that for sure. But just for this quick demonstration, I'm just doing like a almost like a little loose sketch of this bird. So I have sort of the, direction it's placed on the canvas. I think the branch needs to come down a little here. And you could see that I'm getting to a point where I might need to erase a little bit of my line. What I want to do is just dip the brush in the turp. You can see that. And then we are going to wipe the brush on this cotton cloth. And then with that clean brush, I'm going to come at the line and I can actually move that line into more of like a soft shading. And I can shift the line from left to right. I can do that same thing from the outside of the bird. So if I didn't really like where that was placed, I might just scrub that out into the background. Okay, so in that sense, I can move things and I can also refine my drawing a little bit. So what was once like a very rough, choppy line, I can kind of smooth out, and I'm still at this very moment kind of building out the value pattern, which is one of the goals of this block in layer. So for me, looking at that value pattern and really establishing it early is a critical part of the block in. There's nothing white in this reference. Even the highlights, I don't think those are going to be pure white. But my point is that we eventually want to see every area of this canvas kind of blocked in with value. And I don't want you to feel like you have to get the perfect line, the perfect likeness, the perfect proportion, even. We're going to chip away at it. This is very movable and very forgiving. But what I mean by like the value pattern is places where the background is darker than the bird, we want it to look darker than the bird. We're not using full color. We're just kind of using the white of the canvas to show through to make these lighter values. So we're just kind of, it's almost like a Polaroid picture developing. We want to see the general shapes and relationships between these values as soon as possible. So what I mean is, like on the branch is a little bit lighter than the background. I'm going to try to capture that in my value wash. So I'll start by making the background behind the branch just a little bit darker. And then I'm going to wipe off that brush again. I'm going to go in, I'm going to lift a little bit. And you can kind of see things are emerging, and I have lots of time to like change this entirely. If I'm suddenly like, ooh, I don't love the placement, I wish it were a little more to the right, I could scrub this whole thing out with turp right now. And this turp is just like an odorless mineral spirit, but don't use the one from the hardware store, even though it's less expensive. Get a good one from the art supply store. It has less VOCs. I like Gamsol, and I would highly recommend that you have good ventilation for this. There are other methods. Like sometimes people don't like this method because of all of that terp that we're using, and maybe it's a little bit fumy. Even though it's odorless, it still is potentially something that will be irritating to some folks. So there are other methods. I like to do this entire step in acrylic sometimes because you can always paint oil over acrylic, just not the other way around. Now the branch shadow is darker than the background, so I'm attempting to get those two values to separate a little bit more and darken up on the branch just a little bit so we can see it against the background. And those are the questions that we're asking ourselves. What is darker than what? What is lighter than what? We can find that from looking at our edges. So we're not thinking in terms of line, we're thinking in terms of like an edge of value. Tail feathers in, and then we can refine the shape even more. I don't spend a ton of time worrying about, oh, is this exactly the way the wing is going to go at first? Believe me, I'm doing my best, but you have so much time to refine it. And I think that, like, if you refine too early and it's so perfect, everything is so paint by numbers, there's kind of less life to it somehow. All right, can we see this a little bit? Can you guys see it kind of appearing? We have a darker plane the body of the bird, then the branch underneath it is light at that edge. Little foot here, so I can maybe start to indicate that. Now, what's darker and what's lighter here? Sometimes it's really close and you just have to make a decision. So I'm going to put the bird darker than the background by a little bit. And here's the other leg. We can start to indicate a little. And as I go, I'm kind of looking, are things lining up okay? Am I getting too into a detail where I'm not really ready for it yet? I need to move this form over a little bit. Tail is in entirely the wrong place. Bring that branch right back in front of the bird. No big deal. The neck here is much darker than the background. And it's kind of what divides the bird from the space behind it. So I want to lighten up back here. Okay, here we go. I have plenty of room for this beak. You can see I don't have like a perfect drawing by any means. I'm going to chisel away at this until it's there. Okay, that's looking a little bit more like it. I still feel like the tail is like a little incorrectly placed. Let's just scooch that back over. But see, I like to make that adjustment kind of as I go. Here we go here. Rounder, it's darker back here. That's going to make things a little bit more dramatic. And I'm not trying to go as dark as my darkest darks look from the reference. It's just the relative lights and darks. We just want to see the bird's a little darker than the background there. And then here it's much darker than the background. And that's because the background gets a little bit lighter and the bird gets a little darker. So it's just getting these value relationships in. And you're doing this in the most forgiving, light, easy way possible that's still maintaining some life. I mean, you can absolutely draw this carefully in pencil. You could even transfer it from another piece of paper if you wanted to. But there is something really fun about just allowing the materials to flow and just kind of using that like very forgiving, movable stage that oil painting offers, right, at this early stages to create your drawing. And I think it kind of keeps it a little bit more lively. So try it out. Try this method out. Like I said, there are definitely others, and I would be happy to. I'll show you a few more. I'll get some more videos up soon, going over some of the methods that we use to start that initial stage of a painting here at the studio. Now, this can be one that you spend a whole lot of time and really refine. So it just kind of depends like what your goal is with the painting. I'll refine it a little bit more just so you can kind of see where that's going. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. We need a little bit of recognizable placement here for that. Maybe a little refining on the drawing and shape. All of this decision making we can kind of do now. And again, if you don't love how something ends up, you can wait a few minutes and kind of paint over it. You can go in right away and like adjust and change your line and placement like this. And I'm just doing this with a fairly clean brush with like just the lightest bit of turf, and I keep wiping that brush off. Shift the beak over a little bit and take out just a little bit more light through here. maybe sometimes I'll put down a little turf and then I'll take that out with the cloth rag. We're just going to darken through here, give you a fairly complete block in here in the next couple minutes. You can see I'm not leaving much white, and I can go over this in my next layer with some lighter colors as well. I like to, at this point, start to establish like what are the directional elements that are happening here in the background. And go back through, even just setting up for a few minutes instead of lifting it, it like paints over it. So this the terp does set up pretty fast. And I always say terp, that's just sort of my shorthand. It could be Gamsol. In fact, of terpenoid and Gamsol, I tend to purchase Gamsol. All right, so again, just focus on the values and where I want the most contrast is going to be against this light edge of the bird. But then I want to pick up the dark, oops, on the face as like the even darker value. Okay. I'll make this darker. And you could see, I mean, there's so much refining that needs to happen. Shape, background, edge, but like the image is here. It's all there. I can certainly work with this. And that's really like the point of it, is to like, how do you actually start a painting, right? How do you get enough on the canvas that you can still work with it, but it's not so permanent that it's working against you? So you want to get something nice and forgiving like this transparent layer. And so again, just think values and edges. How do we see something? Certainly doesn't have a line around it. It probably has more of like a one darker value against a lighter value. Brush. All right. Sometimes I'll go over it a couple of times before it really starts to like lift enough with the brush. But I do like the look of a brush lift better than the lift of a white cloth on the canvas. It's just so much more specific and get like a lot of a more descriptive. Okay. So that will serve as our block-in for today. We could let this dry and then go right into this with the color layer, and let me know if that's what you want to see next or what other topics interest you. I'm happy to give these brief tutorials for you as I build kind of more of an online lesson library. So let me know what you're into and I'll make sure to film something for you. Okay, see you soon.